So this is my entire watch collection, and we're gonna be going through piece by piece in this video. I've been obsessed with watches for pretty much my entire life. Pretty much haven't missed a day of having a watch on my wrist since second grade. So it's one of my longest standing passions and one of my most irrational, crazy obsessions as well. So in this video, I'm gonna break down each piece. We'll go through the entire lineup here, kind of how I feel about it, why I have it, what it is. And as we go through, you'll kind of get a taste of how my tastes have become where they are and why I choose different pieces. So let's just jump into the collection. All right, so first off, and these are really in no particular order because I would have overthought how to possibly, rank these or something in some way. But this is my Omega Speedmaster. You'll see as we break through this collection that I'm mostly a vintage fiend. There's a few modern pieces in here, but these are mostly vintage. So this is a 1971 145.022. And the Omega Speedmaster is, one of the most iconic watches of all time. It's got the story of being the first watch on the moon, all of that. So, this one is not quite old enough to the fact where it wouldn't say that it's been to the moon, meaning this is just after 1971 versus 1969. So a true moon watch would not say moon watch or anything NASA, anything on it. This is just a little too late to be in that category, but in my opinion, far better than the moderns. This one has this ghosted bezel, which has faded over time, and the modern ones have a flat dial that to me just looks like it came out of an inkjet printer, whereas the about this old and previous had these three-dimensional stepped dials that just look incredible. And it's the type of thing that until you hold these pieces in your hand in person, you just can't really tell the nuances or the differences. It also has the tritium lume, so that is the ability for the watch to light up when you put a flashlight on it. Obviously, it doesn't work too well for vintage watches that have, this is a 50-year-old watch almost, but it'll still light up briefly. But they get this creamy aging, which is just so much cooler than anything modern in my eyes. So this is a watch that, I just throw it on a lot of the time. It's one of my few pieces that comes on the bracelet, so it just feels a little more sporty and casual to just like throw on and not worry about too much. It is a vintage piece, but it feels robust enough to throw on and doesn't feel so dainty like some vintage pieces that we'll get into do. So yeah, this is just an iconic look and you can't go wrong with the Speedmaster. So moving on from the Speedmaster, let's stay in the same sort of category here. This is my Omega Seamaster 120. So this is a touch older than my Speedmaster. This is from 1965. I think these are such a good buy. They're so undervalued because it has that diver look, almost like a vintage Submariner, something like that, but you can pick these up very reasonably. I think they've gone up in the time that I've had it, but I just think it's just such a great watch. It's a great size. I think this comes in close to about 37 millimeters, which really sits on the wrist really nicely and just has a great vintage vibe and that diver style. This one definitely gets a good amount of wrist time. As we get through, I'll talk about some how I have a problem of owning watches I won't even wear, but this one I have definitely gotten some good wear out of, and I just love it. I just think it has that vintage charm, especially with this like 2-tick strap that I've got on it. It just really has that look in it. The bezel is a touch faded, which I kind of feel like is a good pair with my Speedmaster. So I feel like these two make a great pair, and this one will also this will become relevant at the end of the collection. You'll see what I mean. But moving on, let's go to a modern piece here. And by the way, part of the reason it took me years to make this video is I was overthinking like the angles. So hopefully this is like a good, I'm gonna overlay other footage and stuff like that, but hopefully we've got some good shots. This is my Grand Seiko SBGH 267. So it has the incredible bluish purplish anodized rotor with this like textured forged look to it. The dial has just got insane details. As I said, I'm not a huge modern guy with watches, but this one really piqued my interest for several reasons. One, first off, being that I've always heard how amazing Grand Seiko is. Everyone loves to talk about it, but none of them really spoke to me. Most of them are too large, just not really my tastes, but this one ticks pretty much every box it possibly could. It's 39.5 millimeters, which is definitely like my upper limit, but it works. And the texture dial is just mesmerizing. And it's one of those cliches, you have to see it in person type of thing, but it really truly is. And the level of finishing on these watches is, you know, at a 10K plus level easily, if not more. So this lately, since I picked this up earlier this year, this has really just been my throw-on watch. You know, I kind of got the bug a little bit back into moderns just because you don't worry about it. You know, I can wash my hands without having to worry about damaging anything. So it's kind of nice to have a couple modern pieces in the collection. And this one is just gorgeous and stunning and fits perfectly on the wrist. It has a blue dial. Blue dial is kind of my thing too. Not too much present in my collection, but I love texture dials. I love blue dials, and this is a texture blue dial. So it's just incredible. Bracelet's nice. One of my only 2 bracelets, so it's just a great watch to throw on and not worry about too much, though it has the Zaratsu polishing, so you have to kind of be a little bit fanatical about, you would never want to like have it repolished somewhere else or get nicks or scratches or something like that. So it's not like a watch to not worry about at all, but you know, the fact that it's modern makes it feel a little bit more just easily wearable. Moving on from there, let's go to the watch that probably worries me the most to wear. This is by a long shot the rarest watch that I have in my collection. Maybe we should have saved this for later in the video, but this is a Universal Genève pole router. So pole routers are famous because they were the first watch to take a commercial route over the North Pole, something like that. To be honest, I'm like a little rusty on some of the exact details with a lot of these because, you know, some of these have been in my collection for quite a while at this point. But with this, I've loved pole routers for years and never really had some. Pieces have moved in and out of my collection. I guess I should mention, part of the way I got a lot of these vintage watches was because I used to buy and sell watches as a side business / hobby, and a lot of these ended up in my collection because they were watches that I bought to check out, potentially resell, and then kind of ended up keeping the unsellable ones, if you will. This one was not the case. This was one that I just bought for myself, definitely paid top dollar, but that's because it is not just a standard pole router, which is still an incredible watch that I would like to have more of. I would like to collect a lot of pole routers. I mean, this is one of my biggest obsessions overall, but this one is insane because it has the two-tone in the bezel. The indices are gold, the hands are gold, but it's in a steel case with a steel bezel, and that basically doesn't happen. So this is a reference 20217-9, and there is a site, I believe it's Universal Genève Pole Rotor.com, and that site documents all of the different reference numbers, the serial numbers, and things like that. And there are only pictures of 2 of these on the internet. So 2 different ones have been documented of this particular reference. That's it. The known serial numbers, there's one in the middle. So it's like let's say it ends in 791, and then the other known one ends in 793. That's not it exactly, but the only 2 ones are off by 3 total. So there might be 3, there might be more, there might only be 2, but an incredibly rare watch to have in this particular configuration. There's plenty of pole routers out there without the two-tone in the bezel. You know, there's gold on gold, there's steel on steel, there's black dials, silver dials, but to have the two-tone in the steel case is a reference 20217-9, and there literally may only be 2 or 3 of these ever made in this particular configuration. So while a pole router is already one of the coolest watches in my opinion, Gerald Genta designed, same person who designed the Patek Nautilus, the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak. This was one of the earlier pieces, and it has a lot of aqua terra in it. I'll touch on that when we get to that piece, but the twisted lugs, the sharp case, it's just such a great design. And then to find one in such a rare configuration, I basically just had to have it. So, you know, I definitely paid more than a standard pole router for this, but condition is absolutely on point. And I just love wearing this watch. They look so tight on the wrist, like just such a clean design, and damn, like, yeah, these are just amazing. But because it is as rare as it is, this one does worry me a little. It feels very robust, it feels fine, but it's just probably the most irreplaceable watch that I own by a mile. All right, moving on from the pole router, which, God, I feel like I didn't even say enough. It's just such a cool watch, but that'll have to suffice for this video. Next up is another texture blue dial. This is my Rolex 1601 Datejust. This is a 1971 two-tone. This was one that I did buy back when I was buying and selling, and just had to keep. I mean, I just love this watch. It's the only Rolex in my collection currently, and I definitely do get a good amount of wrist time with this one. I have it on the ostrich strap here, which is a bit of a theme as well. But yeah, I mean, the two-tone, the blue, the texture, I think I said texture, but I didn't say that it's a linen dial, so hopefully I'll be able to show some shots that really show off the texture there. But linen dial, blue dial, two-tone, looks great. It's a rare configuration. They're out there, but this is not the best example of all time. You know, I'm sure there are, if you found another one, it's possible you could find one a little bit more crisp in the case than this. It does seem a little bit worn, but it's just a great watch to wear and not worry about too much. And I'm only up in value in this watch, considering what I paid and considering it's probably trickled up a little in the time I've had it as well. So my 1601, yeah, I mean, just an awesome watch. But yeah, moving on. This was like the first, I've probably had this watch for maybe longer than anything else here on the table. Actually, yeah, for sure. So this was one of the first watches that I really started lusting after, when I, you know, started getting the bug for expensive watches, and it was the electric blue that caught me so much. And I actually owned the sort of like the automatic Speedmaster version of this long before I had the other Speedmaster, and before I had this, eventually got this Speedmaster and then sold that and bought this. This is the 2803.33, which is the smaller iteration of this. You'll sense that's a theme in my collection. I don't like watches that are too big. They look chunky and ridiculous on my wrist, which is relatively small. But in general, I think most watches are too big for most people. So not just my wrists, I think it's just a matter of taste and how watches should fit. But this is the 39, which again, as I mentioned for the Grand Seiko, even the Speedmaster, that's still pushing my upper limit. But just in there, I really prefer like a 37 or so, but you know, anything over 40, I won't touch. So this is in there, and it was really that electric blue that sold me on it originally. And it was one of the first, you know, higher end, you know, 4-figure plus watches that I owned, which, you know, now there are several, of course, but back then this was a huge milestone for me. I probably had this piece for probably like 5-6 years, something like that. And this is, of course, modern as well, though probably pushing 10 years at this point. I mean, it wasn't brand new when I got it. So yeah, I mean, a great watch, such presence, though I've definitely found myself wearing it much less, but I can't really seem to part with it. All right, next up, this is a Jaeger LeCoultre JLC. There's multiple pronunciations of that one, but it's been a minute since I've said it. This is the Memovox E855, which is kind of the iconic but standard Memovox. Like, there are ones that get absurdly rare, absurdly expensive, but this is like the classic without being completely outrageous. There are much lower less interesting ones than this. This is to me, this is the one to have until you get into the crazy stuff. Of course, had to go with the steel. The size of these, they just wear incredible. I mean, they're, I believe 37 millimeters. And with that size and this, it just has such a bold modern presence and still just looks so incredibly clean. And the reason that these are cool is that these blew my mind when I first found out this was even a thing. This is a obviously fully mechanical watch, as all of these are, you know, that is kind of a given for a nerd like me in watches, but it's an alarm watch. So we're talking about a mechanical alarm, which when I even found out that was a thing, it just blew my mind. So where that triangle points is where the alarm would be set, and then you have a crown for winding the watch as normal, and then a crown for winding the alarm. So if I wind up the alarm, I'll just do it a little bit, and then if I run the hands forward, so weird. It's such a jarring noise because it's analog, you know, it's not a beep, it's this hammer rattling around in there. But yeah, when I found out that was a thing, I blew my mind, and this is still just such a cool watch. This is definitely one I wear a bit less because it does have a little bit of that dainty feel. I think it's a bit just in my head, but since it's a bumper watch and you also have the hammer in there, there's just you feel a lot of movement inside of it. So it can definitely feel like one that I want to be quite careful with. It is an E855, it is pretty rare. The condition of the case is immaculate and untouched. So, you know, original signed crowns, which a lot of them don't have. So, yeah, it's one that I should wear more. I haven't worn this in a minute, but just an excellent, amazing watch. Oh, and I don't think I said this would have been from the mid 1960s or so. Yeah, these are so cool. Memovox E855. Moving on to a modern piece, which I once owned and then traded for the Seamaster 120. Didn't own one for a few years, and then decided to add one back into the collection with a slight variation on what I used to have. So I once owned, I believe, was the 701, and then the Dunkel version as well, which was the black dial. I love both, but this time when I went back into one more recently, I went for the 703, which is not rare, but it's definitely rarer to find than the 701, and it gives you the sapphire case back, which is great to see that in-house movement, and like, you know, they're really nicely finished. Nomos is mind-blowing for the price range. To be able to get in-house nicely finished movements for these price points are crazy, and at a nice size, 36 millimeter. As by now you know, I'm a fan of that size. So yeah, I love these, the accent colors. There's some rare ones out there I'm seeking, but I like the red accents. The Dunkel is super cool as well. Nomos is just a great brand, one of the few moderns that ticks the boxes for me. So can't go wrong with Nomos. There'll be another we'll touch on, but yeah, had to add that back in after the trade. But I figured this was a little more replaceable than the 1965 Seamaster 120, and a trade worked out, so went for that. All right, next up we have a very crazy early Omega Seamaster. So this is an early 50s. I believe the serial dated it to 1953 or 1954. What's incredible about this one, well, I'll get to that in just a second, but this is a chubby case Seamaster. So they're only 34 millimeter, but given the fat lugs, they wear quite nice on the wrist. And what's insane about this one is this dial would have originally been black, and the lacquer would crack and create this glittery effect. And then you also have the brown effect, which is what people call tropical. So this is tropical, glitter, crazy dial are some of the terms that describe it, but hopefully I can get a shot that shows just how absolutely insanely wild this dial is. This is not retouched or redone, anything like that. This is an original dial, black dial, would have been a gloss black gilt dial with the gold text beneath it, and faded to this insane glitter brown. So just wild, like just a crazy one. So this was one that I never intended to keep, but just seeing it and seeing how irreplaceable it was, I figured I might as well hold on to it. And moving on, I'll switch these two given that I just talked about that one. So we have another chubby case Seamaster. This one is definitely more standard. It's got the crosshair dial, which you know, is definitely something that people look for. The other one doesn't, but more of a standard situation here than the crazy dial. But I just thought this particular one, I had handled a lot of them, and something about this one just had that bold presence of being thick and, you know, not just not like polished down to nothing. It just has that bold feel as if it were new. And the case might have been redone, but if it was a bit, it was flawless. I mean, it literally looks like a new one of these. So the dial does show some aging, but this one just has such a crisp presence on the wrist that I couldn't move it. I almost sold this for years, but I still haven't. So what do you think? Worth keeping? And then we have another vintage Omega, both of those early 50s. This would have been early to mid 50s. This would have been early 60s or so, maybe 63 to 65. I forget what it exactly dated to when I checked it, but we have a linen dial. I love texture dials, and just immaculately clean. So kind of the same story as the other Seamaster. This is not a Seamaster. This is a manual wind. I've had a Nomos Orion before the club, and this one reminds me a lot of it. I'll get to one in a minute, and maybe I'll pull this one back up to show the comparison. But after owning the Nomos Orion, it made me realize just how, like, wow, Omega had a bit of that DNA at one point, and this has that feel. Like, the case is similar to an Orion. It's manual wind, so it's super thin. It's just a minimalist type of dial, you know, sub-seconds, just very, 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 very clean. So while it's definitely one of the more basic pieces in the collection, it was just another one that I just didn't seem worth parting from because it's just so clean and perfect. So the next vintage Omega, quite a few vintage Omegas in a row here, but that's a bit of the theme. This one I wasn't even sure about including in the video. I've actually never worn this watch out. So this was one I bought to resell actually more recently. I stopped years ago, but I bought this thing. I might keep it, I might sell it, and I haven't sold it. It's just been sitting, but I wasn't quite sure about it once I saw it in person. You know, it's the Admiralty Omega, which was kind of like geared towards younger people. It has the bright orange, it has the anchor on the dial. So cool. Like, I lusted over these for so long, but I was just not sure I liked it as much on the wrist. So I'm still kind of undecided. I haven't spent too much time with it, but yeah, this could be one that you guys can let me know in the comments what you think. Is it worthy of this lineup, or should it go? But I do really respect and admire the Admiralties, but just wasn't as sure about it in person. But even now that I'm looking at it, I'm like, yeah, I mean, it is pretty sweet. Maybe it's just not on the right strap, but such a cool watch. The next part of the collection, these are ladies' watches. So these ones are, well, mine / my wife's. You know, it's kind of like, obviously I'm the most obsessed one. She loves them, she wears them, but like I'm the nerd, right? I'm the freak who does this. So, you know, these have kind of come out of that, and she has learned to appreciate them and wear them and all of that. But they kind of they excite me probably even more on some levels. But here we have this was my my 25th birthday present to her. This is the Nomos Orion Rose 33. So just an insanely perfect women's watch. Like, it doesn't get much better than this. 33, perfect size, thin, manual wind, in-house movement, sapphire case pack, you know, not insanely priced, just incredible. I mean, obviously it looks probably a little small and weird on on my wrist, but yeah, I probably should have had her like model these for the video, but such a good watch. And I owned an Orion at one point. As I said, I see these similarities to the 60s Omega that I have, so that's a cool pair. And then I got my Nomos back as well, so we have the pair with the with the matching alpha movements. So yeah, this is kind of her flagship. And then a more recent acquisition was, well, not too recent, but this just blew my mind. I found this piece on eBay. It's a Seamaster 120. It is the mid-sized, I believe is what they refer to it as, which is far too small for my wrist. It looks quite ridiculous. I mean, not that ridiculous, but I wouldn't wear it. But with the blue bezel, the blue dial, and it is a perfect match to my Seamaster 120. So these two just make such a cool pair. Hers is in way better condition, literally like unworn. And the blue, I mean, if the blue were on the men's, the larger size definitely goes for more money because it's more desirable. But to be able to find, you can find such better value and condition looking at women's watches because there's not as much fanaticism in the vintage world for that. So to be able to find this condition blue would just almost be impossible for the men's one. So I was so thrilled to find this, and I just had to have it. She likes it. She does wear it, which is awesome. But this watch is it's insanely clean. I hope that the video will do it justice. And then the last ladies' watch was one that we never intended to keep either. Quite reasonable. This is a Seamaster Ladymatic. So, or not Seamaster technically. It doesn't say Seamaster on the dial. It has the Seamaster case back. But I guess it's part of the Seamaster line, but teeny tiny. This was probably like 20 millimeters or something like that. And we had picked up some of these before and kind of like flipped through in and out of them. And I just thought, again, this one was just so immaculate that why bother selling it for just a touch of cash when it's so immaculate. So that one stayed. But overall, I mean, this is my watch collection. This is my obsession. There's so much more that I am chasing and lusting after. Someday, I've always considered even getting rid of all of them and, you know, downsizing to some bigger ticket pieces that are rarer and things like that. But I just can't bring myself to part with most of these. And yeah, I think you'll kind of see I don't like overly thick watches. I don't like overly large watches. I obviously like mechanical, some history to it, the right aesthetics, all of that. But that is where my collection sits today. Let me know if you'd like to see more watch videos of any type. I've thought about making videos about investing in watches, how to own certain watches for free, because most of these have honestly cost me nothing. I could sell this entire collection and be up from what I paid total. I'm not saying it's a great investment, but it's something you can enjoy as you kind of park some money in it. I've thought about making videos of that, so let me know if that is something that people would be interested in. And yeah, please do subscribe to this channel if you have not already. This is a bit of a different video, but I would encourage you to check out some of the others, mostly talking about entrepreneurship, lifestyle design, you know, how I've got some of these and how I spend my time and try to craft my life. That's kind of the main thing, and some obsessions like this and cars. So yeah, subscribe, hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. Those things make a difference. Leave comments. You know, what was your favorite watch? What do you think I should get rid of? What should I keep? What should I sell? What should I acquire next? And which one of these would you take? So yeah, thanks for watching. See ya.